this is the nail in the coffin of his approach and appeal to evangelical women. But as we learned, many rallied around the Trump cause anyway. And here we are in 2020, even though Mr. Trump did not win the 2020 election, still a lot of the data and polling would say many evangelical women were still on the Trump train. Now, I'm giving all that setup for you to share your thoughts. I mean, what do you think about this development or this reality from 2016 to 2020 when you forecast there would be a real pushback? And actually, there wasn't so much, it seemed, in the community of evangelical women. What would you, what would you attribute that, or how would you interpret that?
Yeah. Well, to give a little bit of context for that very tumultuous time in our country's history. So the day that the news of the Access Hollywood tape was released was my last day at Christianity Today. You know, I had given my 3 weeks notice before that. I was packing up. One of my colleagues comes into my office and says, "Did you hear about this Trump news?" I was like, "No." And honestly, just like, I'm so glad I don't have to think about it because I'm burnt out. I want a sabbatical.
Not a cauldron of controversy.
And then 3 days later, I wrote that Washington Post piece. I was on CNN for 5 minutes trying to give voice. Okay, how are evangelical women responding to these comments? And based on what I was observing from some high profile evangelical women, not just Beth Moore, but, Kay Warren of Saddleback and Christine Caine, Julie Roys, just women who are thoroughly, evangelical, theologically orthodox, probably have supported many Republican candidates in the past. But wow, they're really speaking out in a way that I haven't noticed before. Surely this is kind of a bellwether for where evangelical women are with the campaign and how they're going to vote. And obviously I wasn't right. And a lot of people just were, I think we underestimated the alliance between the white evangelical movement and the Republican Party. And I mean, this was an unusual election in that we seem to have a Republican candidate who arguably has said and done things that kind of fly in the face of what Christians would consider, marks of character. And so I grew up hearing character's really personal character, personal morality is really important in terms of who we elect and who we choose for our political leaders. And so that was the surprise. I would attribute that to a couple things. I think a lot of evangelical women are very concerned, they continue to be concerned about abortion and the number of unborn children whose lives are taken every year. And I think when you think about that cost and that tragedy, a lot of Christians are willing to kind of make a pragmatic argument to say, well, I don't like this political leader. No, I'm not going to have him lead my church, or I'm not going to have him, teach my kids or whatever. But listen, he's in charge. He has the power as a political leader to maybe change policy or to elect Supreme Court justices or nominate Supreme Court justices. And so we have to just make a bargain, right? And that was, I think, that language of bargaining. Like if we grant this person power and we kind of get behind this person, then we'll get certain kind of, changes that we want to see will be enacted because this person has promised to do that. So I think a lot of evangelical women probably kind of rationalized it in that way. But I'm not entirely sure that Christians writ large are turned off by Donald Trump. I think a lot of evangelical Christians who feel like the cultural tides are changing so quickly, the concerns about religious liberty, concerns about free speech, concerns about the ability to gather and assemble and believe based on conscience. If those are concerns that you have about the future, then someone who comes along and says, I'm not I'm not like a gentle, meek person. I'm a fighter, and I'm going to fight for you. I'm always going to fight for you. I mean, I think that's exactly what Trump promised evangelicals. And a lot of evangelicals wanted to hear that, and wanted to believe that someone in Washington, D.C. would be for them and fight for them and fight for the things that they hold dear. And so if anybody's spent any time reading things that I've written, I was not pleased with this outcome. I think that bargain will have some detrimental effects and already has had detrimental effects for the church. But I understand why
there's
a lot of
sensibility about it.
Yes, I understand the pragmatic rationale, and I understand the concerns that a lot of Christians have about cultural changes in this country and how they're affected by them. And someone who says, I'm going to defend you and fight for you, that sounds really good if you feel concerned about the future.